Y'all give me a minute. I'm gonna get started in just a minute. I'm just gonna share the show real quick, and oh man, we'll get into it. Quick bill. Let me see if anybody else in here real quick. Nah. Like I said, give me just a minute. I'm gonna share the show. Those few that's watching right now, if you don't mind, help me share the show. I want to go ahead and get started and get done with it. Oh, one time. I'm sharing these groups real quick. Shoot. Share the groups, share the groups, share the groups, share the groups.
What is that noise? Are you texting?
Trying to do a show real quick. Like I said, y'all bear with me. If y'all don't mind, just bear with me, please. You know, I know some pop in here and get impatient and ain't got started, they pop right on out. That's fine too. But you know, those that interested in hearing this presentation slash bill, like I said, give me just a minute and we're gonna get I'm gonna get started. He's ugly too. All right. Give me a second, y'all. I'm gonna jump into it. Peace to those that's in the chat. Okay. All right. All right. Let me get back up here and I'll get started. First, I want to say ETM Hotel, Dua Aku, Dua Necha, Fatmu Lafayette, Fatmu Iwa Riri, Majuba Iba E Gungun, Majuba Iba E Ilakba. First, I want to give honor and praise to the true and living ancestors, because without the ancestors, we wouldn't be here. We are our ancestors. I also want to give Honor and praises to the true and well, the true and living elders out there according to African traditions. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Peace to the few that we have in the chat. Please share the show with those that you think that may like this information or appreciate this information. Please share the show. Please like the show. I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna get started. Share sound through computer. And as soon as my screen pop up, man, I'll get started, man. All right. Share my screen. I'm gonna look on the other end. Y'all let me know when it's sharing on. Excuse me. It's sharing on the other end. Yeah, again, peace to those who are in the chat. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, peace again to those in the chat. Peace to those that may be coming in or following in a little bit later. Peace to those that may be coming, to those who are watching it in the archive as this presentation slash discussion is over with. Um, Today's presentation is called Oral Tradition. Just, I mean, oral tradition is just as important as writing, the reiterated presentation and discussion. I put reiterated presentation slash discussion because I did a presentation a few weeks ago on Kofi Piesie TV called African Oral Tradition. So I wanted to break down oral tradition. I'm coming back to do a reiterated presentation because I didn't, in the first presentation, I was tired of actually didn't finish it, but I presented what I had on the next day as promised. And just a few people engaged on my Facebook post and um, someone having a discussion with me on the phone, Sister CK. Um, I said I'll come back because, people still is not understanding what is African oral tradition or what is encompassed behind African oral tradition. And as I explained earlier, that African oral tradition is not just word of mouth. And for those that may have missed the presentation on Kofi Piesie TV, you can go back and look at African oral tradition. This is oral traditions, and it is just as important as writing, and it is just as important as writing. And so I have a few slides that I got from the old presentation, but a lot of it is the slides that I wanted to add to the first presentation that I didn't add to the first presentation because I wanted to show y'all the size of how people say that oral tradition isn't reliable, or people have questions about oral traditions, specifically African oral traditions. Um, so we gonna get into it again. The presentation slash discussion is called Oral Traditions. It's just as important as writing, and it is just as important as writing. And we're gonna get into that. You'll see why I said that. The reiterated presentation slash discussion. Go to the next slide. All right. I always had to put a disclaimer out here before I get started. My disclaimer is I am not a teacher, but merely a student sharing information and information provided for educational purpose only. And if you are in doubt, do the research and have it verified by someone qualified. I reserve the right to change the focus of this presentation to set down, sell, or exchange at my own terms. Hold on, y'all. Hold on. I want to shut my camera off. All right, so I can see better. Verified by someone qualified. I reserve the right to change the focus of this presentation to shut down, sell, or exchange the terms or use in my own discretion. Our trademark, design rights, copyrights, registered names, models, logos, avatars, the signals, or marks used or cited by this website or the property expected owners. I reserve the right to add information as it comes available or adapt changes, improve information as it comes available in the future. Inputs, wanted, changes, additions, deletions, or encourage. Uh, All right, everybody that follow me know this is my saying. As I learn, we all learn. Let's get this culture. Another one of my saying for those who follow me. I stick to those things. Now, what is oral tradition? Oh shoot! And see, I got to slide out of order, but we'll come back to this. So I just pop this up here real quick. After this is the presentation that I talked about on Kofi Piesie TV, Oral Africa Oral Tradition. This is the presentation. If you want to go look at that presentation, it was a great presentation. Go and look at that presentation. This presentation here is oral tradition. It's just as important as writing. So this is two different presentations. You will see a few slides from this specific presentation that I got up here. Just a few. All of the rest of them is new slides. Now going back because it's out of order, but what is oral tradition? Oral tradition is a story. It's a story, traditions, and again, just y'all pay attention. I'm gonna kind of run through some of these slides. I'm gonna try not to keep y'all too long. I'm gonna kind of run through some of these slides. Normally, I'll run through the slides and then I'll talk and break the slides down or go a little bit further in depth with some of the slides. I'm gonna kind of move quick with a few slides, just with questions, answering the questions, but not going in depth. And then when we get into the further into the presentation, I'll start going into depth about the different slides and even the previous slides that I read. But oral tradition is a story, tradition, and practice that shares orally or through speech, usually handed down from generation to generation. Oral tradition is usually eventually written down. Oral tradition is usually eventually written down. Oral tradition is usually written down. Just want to reiterate that, but can tell us so much about the societies and the peoples who originated them and allow history to be kept and shared by groups who do or did not have writing. It was a good way to keep valuable information for others in your groups and would allow the literature of the illiterate alike to share the information. According to Mosuru Babatandi, oral tradition are messages that are transmitted orally from one generation to another. The message may be passed down through speech or songs, or may take the form of folk tales or fables, epic histories, narrations, proverbs, or sayings, and songs. Oral tradition make it possible for the society to pass knowledge across generation without writing. The help the people make sense of the world and are used to teach children and adults about improper aspects as their culture. Is oral tradition worthy of the so-called professional historians? As recently of 15, and again, I'm moving kind of quickly through some of these slides because I want to try to get some of these slides out the way. And then when we get further to the presentation, I'll go more into depth, start explaining certain things. But I just ask for those that are watching or may watch later on um, in the archives, just pay attention to what these slides are saying. So when we get further into the other presentation, other slides, and me talking about it, you'll kind of follow or understand what I'm talking about. As recently as 15 years ago, some Western historians consider African historiography nothing better than an ethno-history or folk history, worthy of attention of the anthropologist, but not a professional historian, due to the assumption that the African continent still lay in the prehistoric period, lacking writing systems, civilizations, a proper sense of history. Such historians mistook the predominance of oral culture and traditions and the closer relationship of African historical sources to folklore to mean the lack of historian consciousness. Indeed, African historical sources are predominantly oral traditions, reportedly through the times as part of knowledge, literature, language, and cultural resources of the community. Yet other sources are contemporary traditions are remembered as a part of personal experience of people living within a generation. Professional historians classify the second category of oral sources, oral sources as oral history. These oral sources represent a baseline international derived data that carries the ideology, philosophical history, and worldview of the community. Through the multidisciplinary methods, historians are able to apply the insights of history, historical language, archaeological, and resources of other disciplines to enriching the evidence of oral tradition, oral history, and oral folklore. Just kind of pay attention to again to what I'm saying with some of these slides. So when I go into depth again, you'll be able to follow me. Oral tradition has a universal form of historical consciousness which usually operates along writing. This was indeed the case of ancient Egypt and the ancient Greece, the secondary center of the invocation and the development of writing. When Herodotus visited Egypt in 450 BCE, he collected a traditional form of traditions from the priests who were also custodians of the archives. The Greek fathers of the Western historiographic traditions was himself and the practitioners of oral traditions of oral history. Historians of Africa use historical footprints whenever they can find them and whenever forms oral tradition, oral history, folklore, ethnographs, and linguistic records, archaeological artifacts, and other sources of evidence. How reliable is oral traditions and source of history? A lot of people, like I say, kind of have issues or questions about when it comes to oral tradition. And a lot of the worldview or perspective, it comes from a from a Eurocentric perspective. A lot of the European historians, and I'm just not going to even say some of the European historians, but those who have trained in the European institution that don't know anything about African culture or African traditions or what entails in oral tradition. How are these multiple ethnic groups in Africa are able to keep their culture, their traditions intact over generation? How are they able to do this without embellishing the truth or telling falsehoods or telling misinformation? Because we know I can tell you something right now, and by the time it gets to 3 or 4 different people, the story may have changed, you know what I'm saying, from the previous source. So we going through this presentation, we gonna go through all of that. How were they able to keep their culture and tradition intact um, through oral tradition? And again, oral tradition is not just mouth to ear. I'm explain it again. Oral tradition is not just mouth to ear. Oral tradition is therefore a reliable source because African non-literature societies have always, from time immemorial, used the more oral modes of which oral traditions is an integrated part of the transmission of their history slash customs, traditions, folklores, etc., from the generation to another. How does oral tradition differ from writing sources? The difference is that written history relies on oral tradition. The difference is written history is rely on oral tradition. The difference is that written history is rely on oral tradition. The difference is the written history is relied on oral tradition. I had to keep reiterating it, as well-trained history, so there will be no writings or writing history without oral tradition. Oral tradition is just as important as writing. Oral tradition and writing goes hand in hand. So again, oral tradition is just as important as writing. Writing and oral tradition goes hand in hand. There will be no written history without oral tradition, as well as trained history professionals, and oral tradition does not rely on written. The difference is that written history relies on oral tradition, as well trained history professionals, and oral tradition does not rely on writing. The difference is that written history relies on oral traditions, as well trained history professors, and oral traditions does not rely on writing. Do oral traditions have historical value? Oral traditions are culturally narratives such as origin stories, myths, and legends that are passed down from generation to generation orally as cultural knowledge. Oral tradition comprise of corpus and explanation values of a historical facts that becomes the touchstones of cultural identity. We're gonna go further into some of these slides when we get a little bit further. Is oral traditions a reliable source of history writing? Many commentators and professional historians, and particularly foreigners, one such as William Frederick Hill, Robert Lewis, Hugh Trevor Rope, and vast African historians trained in Europe, vacuum expressions that oral sources of history is unreliable. This perhaps due to the misconceptions of these historians to equate documentary material with history, and absence of these definite means no history. Even though oral tradition has its own weaknesses and shortcomings, like the exact chronology, which we go through writing as well, those chronologies, when we're dealing with certain chronology in our African history, there are always not always, it's not all, it may be off, you know, it may be off a little bit. And dates, among others, can still be argued. And an example is that when we go to Kemet, when we look in Kemet, we look at certain dates. When we look at the pre-dynastic period, you look, whether you look at the Old Kingdom, the intermediate period, the middle period, the new kingdom, the third intermediate period, and so forth. You will see that through vast amounts of reading and discussing about the dates are always not the same. They are a little bit off, some the same, some off. So the same thing in oral tradition, you know what I'm saying? It's a little shortcomings when it comes to the exact chronology and dates of things. But again, that's also in the writing as well. I just wanted to give an example of that before I move further. All right, Ajaja Aluga, 1999, submitted that such limitations, notables of oral tradition, when they are recognized explicitly, that the historians who must work with them do not necessarily invalidate African in fact, recognitions of limitations strengthens its claim to be scientific while stimulating the rigorous search for other means of achieving reliability. Thus, oral tradition remains reliable source of historical writing. It should be noted that the most part of Africa, learning consists of oral traditions and other oral sources. We're going to get into the other oral sources because, again, oral traditions, I'll say, is broke up into three categories. Those who already watched African oral traditions already know that oral tradition is not just mouth to ear, and oral tradition is broke up into three different categories, and we're going to talk about them three different categories here as well. Commenting on the reliability of oral tradition, but Vanessa, 1965, writes thus: with all practitioners in the field, we can reaffirm that oral traditions are legitimate and valuable sources for the historians, source which immediately are usually difficult to handle, but which can yield information about past events and past trends. They are indispensable if we hope to arrive at a genuine understanding of what happened in Africa. Thus, in order to make oral tradition reliable as a valuable source of historical writings like other sources, the historians using this source must be meticulous, painstaking, and cautious. Hence, the historians usually using orally traditions must possess a intimate knowledge and a clear understanding of local languages, traditions, customs, and the place of people whose oral traditions they are collecting from the reconstruction of their history. I'm going to read that again, but hold on, let me see. All right, I just wanted to make sure nobody popped in. All right. Hence, the historian used oral tradition must possess an intimate knowledge and a clear understanding of the local languages, traditions, and customs of the place and the people whose oral traditions they are collecting for the reconstruction of their history. I don't know why that thing keep popping up there. All right, there are three main categories in oral tradition. So the three main categories when we're dealing with African oral traditions is literature, historically, and erotics. And erotics, like I gave the definition, having or showing knowledge that is gained by studying, possessing, or displaying. All right. So the three categories, the literature includes, this is what literature includes: poetic genres, divination poems, and songs. It also includes proverbs, parables, and incantation. So this is the first part of oral tradition. This is the first category, which is literature. And it possesses poetic gestures, divination poems, and songs. It also includes proverbs, parables, and incantation. We're going to get into that. Historically include narrative based on myths, legends, and historical plays or epics. This is the second category when we're talking about oral tradition. Third, as for the eretics, its category encompasses secret formulas, prayers, and any corpus of historic natures. So those are the three categories. Again, oral traditions is broken up into literature, historically, and erotic. The poems serve many functions. We're dealing with the first category. The poem serves many functions in traditional African societies. The griots, of course, poems from the Mandinka in West Africa was charged with not only singing the ruler praises, but also documenting through songs historical events surrounding the royal or ruling family. So it's saying, and we're going to get into which we know about the griots. We know that the one role of the griots is the historian, right? So we know historian, he's a historian. So historian plays a vital role when it deals with oral tradition, correct? But we also know that the griot is a musician as well. He plays the balafon, he plays the igami, and he plays the kora, which is most of the instrument, the most popular instrument of the griot that you will see, which would be the kora. But you have the igami that he plays as well as the balafon. So he is a musician. I'll run you a little list of them, but we're not gonna go in depth in the griots. I did that on the last presentation. We're not gonna do it on this one. So music also plays a vital role when it comes to oral tradition. I'll say that again. Music plays a vital role when it comes to oral tradition. And I talked about that in the other presentation. And then last week, I had my brother, who's also a part of Kofi Piesie family and affiliate research team. And he specialized in the djembe drum. He teaches classes, he goes around and does things, and he deals with the culture surrounding around the drum, the Mandi people in Mali, Guyana, and etc. So he's very efficient when it comes to the music of the Mandi, the Mandi, the Mandi people. And he validated through the conversation that we had on a previous discussion slash presentation on last week on Kofi Piesie TV. He validated some of the things that I said on my previous presentation about African oral tradition. So again, music plays a vital role into oral tradition as well. So the Mandinki of the West Africa was charged not only with singing the ruler praises, and the griot is also a singer, but also he documenting through song historical events surrounding royal ruling families. So the griots is documenting through singing. He is documenting historical events surrounding the royal and ruling family. He also is a linguistics of spokesman for the kingdom. Um, the osmos of the we talk about linguistics when we deal with when I showed you on a few slides some of the proper tools, and we'll get into some of the proper tools that you have to use when you're trying to retrieve a lot of these past cultures through oral traditions and etc. He's a linguistics and a spokesman for the king, because we know the griot is also an ambassador. The Amuse of the Rwanda and Central Africa, and the Abonge of Zulu in Southern Africa. And the poet is a other ethnic groups of all serves the same purposes. And this is again is part of the literature, which a literature, if you can see my cursor, it includes poetic gestures, divination poems, and songs. It also includes proverbs, parables, incantation, and also includes proverbs, parables, and incantation. I actually done put that on there twice, copy that on there twice, but y'all get what it is, and you can see the griot. We know he is a historian, so historian plays a vital role in oral tradition. He is a musician, so music plays a vital role in oral tradition. He is a he's a singer. He's an ambassador. We'll get into that. And we can see through songs, the griot is documenting the historical events surrounding the royals and ruling family in this particular country. All right, griots. What does a griot do in their role? So we again just explain the roles real quick, and we're gonna move on from it. The griot roles, you have poet. This is the kora that I was talking about. Mostly if you Google griot or images of a griot, you're always gonna see them with other instruments, but this is the most popular instrument right here, is the kora. This kora, and I explain this for those that want to go to Kofi Piesie TV and look at the griots and griotas video, because a woman can be a griot as a griotis, so she can possess these vital roles as well, and they are born into this particular cast of griots. I even had a person from Africa who called in, who Asar Mka, one of his friends from Africa, actually, he got him on the line and verified a lot of the things that I was talking about, particularly dealing with these griots. But again, the griots are poets, they are historians, and all of these roles, mostly all of these roles play a vital part when it comes to oral tradition. So he is a poet, he is a historian, he is an advisor, he is a spokesperson, he is a diplomat, he is a peacemaker. And I'm gonna say he or she, because again, you got the griots and the griotas. Diplomats, praise singer, interpreter. And this is where the linguistics come in. This is where he's able to understand different, and he's able to interpret certain things. So he is an interpreter, and this is one of the tools also that comes with oral tradition. And we'll get into a list of the tools, that you need to have when you're trying to recapture a past culture or tradition or a group of people that's no longer here, or etc. Translator. He is a translator. He is a musician. He is a composer. He or she, let me quit saying he or she is a teacher. He or she is a warrior. He or she is a witness. All right, we still in the first category. The first category again is literature. We'll get into the second category of oral tradition, and we'll get into the third category of oral tradition. The oral skills of the poet. African recognize their orators and its performance. One cannot have one without the other as a functional part of society. The purpose of orators is not merely to entertain or appeal to emotion or physical sense, but to enlighten and to steer the audience into some productive action of initiations of faculty spiritual action. African orators does not departmentalize literature into poetry, prose, or drama, but just language. Hold on, let me get this off here. But just language used by speakers and poets. Examples of use of language rooted in the indigenous African cultures are corpus. This is important because the demonstration that there is no lines drawn between speech, actions, and performance in African communities. There are one and the same. To speak is to perform. 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 Traditional African literatures or African orators exist alongside within African languages. Songs and tales, and this is also a part of the first category, songs. Songs and tales often used to call and respond formats in which leaders call out lines and audience responds to answering refrain. So songs, and also you learning through songs, they are able to keep their history or their culture intact by songs. You know what I'm saying? So, and they're able here where they're able to, just like question and answer. They are singing songs about certain things in their culture, their tradition, or certain events past that may have happened. And then people are responding or answering to certain things. Um, the historicals include, now we're in part two. Historicals includes narratives based on myth, legends, historical plays, or epics. West African fables and folk tales are full of wisdom and generally conveys moral and teachings a lesson. Often these lessons are one of the resourcefulness, independence, and illustrated to the reward the courage. There are different types of folk tales within fables, talking beasts, stories among most common. Many of the African oral tales are types such as traditional hunting songs, trickster tales, dilemma tales, chain tales. I'm not going to go into a lot of these different tales, but again, you are taking away with these different folk tales, you are taking away life lessons, um, and etc. You are always getting something out of these different oral tales that are told in African tradition. And these are just a list of some of those oral tales, or folklores, traditional hunting songs, trickster tales, dilemma tales, chain tales. I give a folk tale of the trickster tale on Kofi Piesie TV when I did the African oral tradition. So for those that may, like I'm saying, you can go back and review that video. And you can review this video. Storytelling. There is a rich tradition throughout Africa of the oral storytelling. Although written history exists for centuries in West Africa, most written was in Arabic, and the majority of the people did not read or write Arabic. So the transmission of knowledge, history, and experience in West Africa was mainly through the oral tradition and performance rather than on written texts. Oral tradition guides social and human morals, gives people a sense of place and purpose. There are often a lesson of values instilled, and the transmission of wisdom to children is community's responsibility. Parents, grandparents, and relatives take part in the process of passing down knowledge of culture and history. Storytelling provides entertainment, development, and imagination, and teaches important lessons about everyday life. Storytelling tools are not just words, but gestures, singing, facial expressions, body movements, and acting to make story memorable and interesting. Sometimes masks and costumes are used to enhance the performance. A storytelling performs epics, and that can be hours or even days long to relate to history and genealogy, battles and political uprisings of communities. They use riddles, proverbs, and myths to educate and entertain. Storytells is important shared events with people sitting together, listening, and even participating in the accounts of the past deeds, beliefs, taboos, and myths. So again, and this here is the people. This is the Chewy people. And this is the them doing their Gulu Wankulu dance here. And again, when we're dealing with masquerades and we're dealing with art performance, you know, they and this slide here, now I'll come back to this slide. It tells you that storytelling tools are it's not just words, but it is gestures, it is singing, it is facial expressions, it is body movements, it is acting to make stories memorable and interesting. So they understood by doing certain types of performance, bodies, and gestures in order for people to continue to remember. And they're out there actually teaching about historical events that may have took place, or teaching about where they may have come from and how they ended up in a particular place, teaching about their genealogy, teaching about their political uprising in their community, also even teaching them about battle tactics, you know, the battle tactics that they use in order to win over certain groups of people. So here, so in Africa, storytelling is a performance arts that creates bonds among community members and transmit traditional culture values. I'll read it again. So African storytelling is a performance art that creates bonds amongst community members and transmits traditional culture values. And I also did a presentation maybe a year or 2 years ago. African Masquerade is the first performance arts. So I talk about performance arts in America and I talk about performance arts in Africa. Maybe this ideal may come from Africa, maybe it didn't, but we in Africa, we was actually doing performance arts in Africa. When you look at the certain masquerades in America, I mean, not even just the masquerades, performance arts, people are playing a role. People are dressing up in costumes and playing roles. And out of some of these um, performance arts, it's a life lesson behind some of the things that's surrounding the storyline. As far as Herod's category, it encompasses secret formulas, prayers, and any corpus of historic nature. Praying is in the commonest forms of worship among traditional African people. The prayers are usually short, interpreted, and succinct, and may be accompanied by sacrificial or offering. They mostly request satisfaction and particular needs or um, give thanks. Evocational and calls of God's interventions into particular matters, blessings of good wishes being acts of God, such as God be within you. Most people that are the opposition really don't understand what African oral tradition is, so they speculate and make assumptions. We African Americans carry on the talk of European talk that oral tradition is not reliable as writing, but oral tradition goes hand in hand with writing. Oral tradition is just as important as writing. All three categories of African oral tradition features repetitions and a parallel structures with creating rhythm, build, suspension, and supreme memorial aids. And again, those three categories are literature, historical, and erotic. And again, and I spoke about this earlier. Um, Most of us don't understand what oral tradition is, or we can't even break down what oral tradition is, or what is the tools to use uh, when dealing with oral tradition. Because a lot of the talk, especially in the educational realm or the scholarly realm, are those that are European descent and non-European descent, or those that may look like us, that may have been trained in those European institutions, find themselves and talk that African oral tradition or oral tradition is not reliable. And I can understand why certain people say that, because again, if I pass down a story, or if I tell a story about what happened in my family or my family history, and I pass it down to someone and someone pass it down to someone else, and by the time it get to somewhere else, it may be lost. It may be lost from the source. But when it comes to African tradition, they'll break down into three different parts. So there are different things that are going on that actually encompass oral tradition. You have the songs, you have the poems, you have the folk tales, you have the folklores, you have the music, you have the griots who are historians. So you have all these different elements. You have the performance arts from the masqueraders. You have the storytellers from the griots, as well as those elders that are in the community that is teaching the babies and etc. in order to pass history down from one generation to the next. And it is certain formalities or certain things that certain criteria in order for people to be in these certain positions. Like the griots, you are born in this family line. Certain elders that been here in certain tribes or clans or in the community for a long time, seen a lot, know a lot. So they're continuing to pass down these different things. So it's a lot that goes with these things. So with the storytelling and the performing, people are able to remember history through songs, through dances, through facial expression, whether or through mouth or through ear, or whether it's through proverbs, or whether it's through prayers that they have to learn, they have to recite, that's encompassing around um, um, their genealogy, where they were and how they ended up in this particular place, war tactics that they may have developed, and was able to defeat people by these war tactics, so they continue to pass these things down. um, just their culture and tradition, their culture and their tradition through certain things, educational wisdom, whether it's through the proverbs, whether it's through poetry, um, documenting history of of royal societies through songs, and through music and etc. So again, those three categories of oral tradition is literature, historical, and erotics. All right. Um, writing. We know that most of Africa was writing. We know, especially when we deal with West Africa. West Africa doesn't have a lot of writing to way, 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 way later. We know when we go and look in North Africa and we look at Kemet, um, we see writing. We see writing everywhere. We see writings on the Tekkens, of the, what they call the obelisks. We see writings on the coffins. We see writings on the walls in the pyramids of the Miku. Um, we see writings on the ceilings. We see writings everywhere. Kemet documented everything. They wrote down everything. So in West Africa and other particular places, you don't see a lot of document of writing until way, way, way later on. We know when we get to West Africa, then when you get the Arabs, you start seeing writing with the Arab, but they these ethnic groups in Africa did later on develop um their own writing system. But we know majority of a lot of the writing systems across the world operates off the Latin script. We speak English. English operates off the Latin script. So many other different groups operate off of the Latin script. So we know writing did come later on. And I'll talk about and give some of the writings of some of these ethnic groups. I'm not going to go into a lot of them. I'm just going to specifically deal with West Africa. I could have gave a list of East Africa, South Africa, Central Africa, and etc. But a letter is a segmentation symbol of a phonetic writing system. The inventor of all letters forms the alphabet. Letters broadly corresponds to a phenomenon in a spoken form of language, although there is rarely a consistent exact correspondence between letters and phenomenon. Latin or Roman script is written system used to write many modern day languages. It is the most used written system in the world today. It is officially the script for nearly all of the language from Western Europe and of some Eastern Europe languages. It is also used in some of non-Europe language such as Turkish, Vietnamese, Mali language, Somalia, Swahili, Talaga. It is alternate written systems for languages such as the Hindu, Urdu, Sabina, and Bosna. So those people that speak these other different languages, when it comes to their writing, they use this Latin script. We know that the Romans started the script. It started with 23 letters, and then it became 26 letters. You had the Etruscans who added on, I think it was Y and Z. They added Y and Z to the alphabet, which they added on to the Roman script. And then you had not added to the Greek script, and then the Romans furthered the script when they came along and added. So we get capital letters, we get lowercase letters, and etc. to what we call this Latin script. So this Latin script is, this written script is used just about everywhere. It is one of the biggest writing systems in the world today. And these letters over here that we call letters, they are also symbols. So they are symbols as well. So when we look in Kemet, when we look in other different places, you see certain symbols that they have. Often that these symbols create words. Letters and the Latin scripts are symbols as well. The alphabet is written system which involves from the Western variety of Greek alphabet. It was the Etruscans who first developed it as borrowing the Greek alphabets, and the Romans developed it further. The sound, the sound of some letters changed, and some letters were lost and gained in several written styles. Hence, development two such styles were combined into the scripts with upper and lowercase letters, capitals, and small letters. Modern capital letters differ only slightly from the Roman counterparts. There are few regional variations. Few West African writing scripts. The Nisabiru, Nisabibidi, the Nichibibidi, is a system of symbols indigenous to what is now southeastern Nigeria that apparently pictograms thought would have been suggested that some of the logograms and uh, syllabograms, the symbols are at least several centuries old. Early forms appear on excavated pottery as well as what are most likely ceramic tools and headrests for the Calabar region. With the range of dates of 400 to 400 CE, there are thousands of Nisibiti symbols, in which over 500 have been recovered. There are once taught in schools to children. Many of the signs deal with love affairs, though they deal with warfare and the sacred of kept secrets. Nisibiti is used on walls, designs, calabash, metals such as bronze, leaves, swords, tattoos. It is primarily used by the Egbe. Hold on, y'all. We got somebody trying to get in here. Promote to the panel. All right, boss, you in here. Okay, so you have it's used by wall designs, calabash, metals such as bronze, leaves, swords, tattoos. It is primarily used by the Ekbe Leopard Society. And you know, those that want to know about the Ekbe Society, go to Kofi Piesie TV and not Kofi Piesie TV, but Mossi Warrior Clan YouTube channel with his channel in the archives. And Brother Ben did a presentation. For more about it, you can read my article about the secret societies on Kofi Piesie written compositions.wordpress.com, where I talk about the Ikbek Society, also known as the Nibi or the Igbo, Igbo, a secret society that is found across the cross states of the Ikuo, Ikeko, Igbo, and other nearby people. And the Nisibiti strip it originated by the Abjagon people, and you can find out more about those people on Kofi Piesie TV, as well. Brother Shawn, who is also a member of Kofi Piesie Family and Affiliates research team, did a presentation on that about 2, maybe 3 years ago. Great presentation. Dinkra is a set of symbols developed by the Akan used to represent concepts of Afrinim's oral traditions attributed to the origins of Adinkra, Guiami, or modern-day Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. According to Kwame Anthony, after they were one of these meanings were supporting the transmission and complex nuisance bodies and practice and beliefs. So the Dinkra symbols, you know, especially if you want more about that, you can go to our Kofi Piesie. I'm just giving y'all references where y'all can go through, and I talk about the Dinkra symbols and how it was used also to communicate with the deceased, that the people in Ghana are the people that practice the Akum system. They used to bury the dead in these Adinkra systems, and these Adinkra systems, these letters, these symbols will communicate and let those who were on the other side know what's going on, and etc. But I think that now they don't bury, you know, the Adinkra symbols are wearing everywhere. You can see the Adinkra symbols everywhere. I even talk about it on there. I give you a list of the Adinkra symbols, what they mean, even show you how when they was burying them, what these symbols actually mean when they was buried, etc. But the Akan script was used by the Bagom in Cameroon. The Bagom, hold on. The Bagom or the Ekhom script is particularly deciphered in 1900. It is used as a letter of records. It was narrated in what used on the Bamoon script. Through the numerous shows more resemblance and the Bamoon that the symbolograms do, and it does not appear to be direct descendants. The only text example is a paper by Lewis Malcolm and a British officer who served in Cameroon in the World War I. This was published without a character in 1921, and the manuscript with the characteristic was deposited in the library at the Cambridge University. This was published in full and Tuster's 1999, 100 characters are recorded. Though it is thought that the script has several hundred more, these include logograms. Some use phonetic symbolograms versus CVS symbols, as well as independent constants and vowels. The ground script was used to write the Wolof and the Mandinki in the Senegal and in Gambia. These are my sources, the few sources that I use right here. Again, this presentation is oral tradition is just important as writing scripts, as the writing scripts. And I'll leave it right here, these sources up. But there would be no writing without oral traditions. You know, those people that was put in place to record, to keep the history or to remember the history in whatever form of oral tradition. And again, remember, oral tradition is not just uh, um, it's not just mouth to ear. There are other different aspects when it comes to oral tradition. And again, they're broken into three different categories. And again, a lot of people that don't understand oral tradition don't think that oral tradition is a reliable source. But because again, they think that oral tradition, when dealing with African tradition, it may be in other cultures. I don't know. I'm just only speaking about African culture because that's what I study. But I study other different things, but I didn't go in Pacific to study other cultures outside of Africa. We'll study the oral traditions outside of Africa to see if their oral tradition entails those same three categories and those same things that are in play when you're dealing with literature historically. When we're dealing with literature, you're dealing with poems, you're dealing with songs, you're dealing with proverbs. We know also you learn about history and certain things of wisdom and other things carried on through proverbs. We know proverbs is uh, very important in Ghana. Poems, you know, is very important in West Africa. Songs, we know the griots are musicians and they also record through songs, record historical present data for the royal family. And etc. Narratives, you learn a lot about you learn a lot through when you deal with the historical aspect of oral tradition, whether it's through the folklores or through um, their uh, their folk tales or through storytelling, um, etc., or through eroded through their prayers and etc. These things was repeated, or through masquerading, you know, by certain hand gestures, facial um, 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 gestures, body gestures, even songs. You are learning things about history through your songs, and even through masquerades, you may learn about the different tactics that they use. Uh, Music, you may learn about the different political aspects that they may have or they may have. Um, so it's a lot that goes into oral tradition, and oral tradition is not just word of mouth. Again, features repetition, apparel structure, repetition. So constantly repetitious apparel structures, and it created rhythm, builds, suspension, and served memorable aids. And it's just not anybody that can pass their history, past their culture, past their traditional, their political view, their moral views and compass, their edicts, um their ethics. So there are many different uh, layers when it comes to oral tradition. I didn't want to keep it too long. Those that may have missed the presentation, go back, check out the presentation. I kind of go through some things to try to explain why oral tradition is a reliable source, where a lot of the information that we talk about that may not be reliable. And I understand why some people may say what they say because they don't understand what oral tradition is, and they thinking again it's just word to mouth. But there's so many different, it's 2-3 different categories, and within those 3 different categories, you have so many different things when it comes to it. I'll go back to it real quick before I end the screen. But again, in the first category, you have poetic gestures, divination poems, songs. It also includes proverbs, parables, and incantations. The second category, historical, includes narrative-based and myths, legends, and historical plays and epics. The third, as the Erudite, is the category with secret formulas, prayers, corpus, and things. So anybody cannot And again, I'm stressing anybody does any and anybody cannot deal when it comes to oral tradition of passing their culture, their traditions, and so forth down. These people, again, when you deal with the griots, anybody cannot be a griot. You know, certain things for people to be in certain societies, you know what I'm saying, or certain communities in order to be a masquerade. But we know the griots, you know, is very important in West African culture, and they served in so many different roles. They was an ambassador, they was musicians, you know what I'm saying, they were songwriters, they were song composers, they was historians, and the list just goes on. So I didn't want to, you know, do nothing too big. This presentation again was just to reiterate the presentation that did, and to uh, put up some more information that I wanted to put out on the first presentation that I did on the what's the name. So again, oral tradition is just as important as writing. Oral tradition and writing go hand in hand. There would be uh, no writing if it wasn't for oral tradition. So there are people that are were actually memorized these information again through certain different tools that was implemented in oral tradition. So again, appreciate those who may have tuned in to watch the presentation. I hope someone learned something from the presentation. Before I end, do anybody? I hadn't looked at the chat, but I looked at the chat. I know it's some other live screens are going. I think Wujao is live, and I think Sister Amora is live now. Brother Vasa just jumped on the panel. Anybody, you got anything, man?
Good job. If you want, I put another YouTube link in the chat, and it's going into some people in excuse me, going into some people in Colombia and how their oral tradition is something that I'm studying to get more information on Binko's Pile. And this takes us back 300 years of a liberated city right here in the Americas that we hardly talk about. But a lot of the story is remained and survived because these people were isolated for a long time. A lot of it has survived through oral traditions, and it matches up with primary documents of the day, but these people have been isolated, you know, so that goes to show. I was wanting to use that as an example of how powerful those oral traditions can be. That's 300 years of isolation that these people maintained their own story. So that's just something we can look at, you know, for that aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I put you a link for that. It's like maybe a 2 to 5 minute video. I shared it in the chat. But outside of that, great build. So, and peace to everybody, of course.
Yeah, I don't see nobody. Got no question, but yeah, peace to everybody that tuned in, man. To watch it, whether you popped in for a few minutes, you popped out, man. I appreciate you popping in. And you're popping out. Please like the show. You know, please like the show, share the show, tell a friend and tell a friend about the show. And you know, and again, share the show with those that you think that may appreciate the information. You don't, if you don't think that they may appreciate the information, don't share it with them. Just share it with those who appreciate it. You know, I like if, you know, that's not sharing the videos and people not even going to even, you know, attempt to even look at it. Share with people that you think that may be interested in information, you know what I'm saying, and share it with people that is trying to learn and understand and connect the dots about our culture and our tradition. And I promise I'll keep trying to do my due diligence of research and sharing the information, because everybody know my saying, as I learn, we all learn. So as I continue to learn and grow, I want to share this information where we all can continue to learn and grow. I always leave my sources at the end of the video so you can go through and look at the sources. You can get the books, you can get the articles, um, the PDFs or whatever you need to get. You know, I don't mind, again, people venting my sources, going through my sources. You know, and if I make a mistake, um, I'm only human. I'm not some of these other guys that feel like they above critique, or they can't, or their information is untouchable. It is unflawed. That is incorrect. Anybody can make a mistake, you know. So I'm not one of those guys. I'm far from being a scholar. I'm still a student that's learning, but I just like to share information. So again, appreciate everybody for tuning in. You know, go check out the one on Kofi Piesie TV, Oral Tradition, Africa Oral Tradition. Um, you know, it was a great presentation. Go check that one out. You know, those that may missed it or came in late, go check this one out. Oral tradition is just as important as writing. Um, the reiterated presentation slash discussion. So I just want to reiterate about oral tradition just to make sure, you know, to get people on page that oral tradition is just as important as writing, and even show you some of the tools that you need to use when you're going through oral tradition through the different categories. And then you can also use archaeology and other things, you know what I'm saying, to compile your information to retrieve uh, retrieve culture or, you know, people cultures or tradition, you know what I'm saying? So just go back and check that out if you missed the beginning of it, because I kind of go through some of that. And even, you know, uh a lot of the talk comes from from Europeans, and even those that may look like us who have been trained in these European institutions. But we know when the Europeans or any other culture looking on African culture and tradition, you know, they never understand it, and you know, they write about it. And like I said, use a lot of the writing you will start to see with a lot of the Arabs and the Europeans writing about certain things. So they're always writing, and then you see a lot of the misleading terms that's ascribing African culture and tradition. I talk about that too in one of my articles. So so you know, but other than that, man, again, appreciate everybody for tuning in, man. Y'all could have been doing anything else. Same spill I give at the end. Y'all could have been doing anything else with y'all time. But y'all tune in just to listen to what I had to say. So, you know, I truly, truly, truly appreciate that. Please subscribe if you hadn't subscribed to my Warrior Clan YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Go in the archive. We have tons and tons and tons of information dealing with African culture. We specifically deal with West African culture, um, West African culture, but we deal with Central Africa, South Africa, West Africa, as well as North Africa. I'll be coming back tomorrow. I'll be dealing with North Africa. I'll be talking about the importance of water, how in Kemet, where water was important all over Africa. And I'll talk about that all over Africa, but we're specifically going to be dealing with Kemet. And we're going to specifically be talking about water and why they feel like water was so important that they had to deify water. So that's going to be a great presentation. So tune in tomorrow. I may go live about 1:30 tomorrow. Then we'll be coming back on Kofi Piesie TV after I come off of my Warrior Clan YouTube channel tomorrow. Excuse me. So yeah, be looking forward for that presentation tomorrow. Again, it is man, I don't even know what the name of the presentation is, but it's dealing with water in Africa. Water in Africa might be the name of it, the Nile River. So we'll talk about the Nile River. We're going to talk about, or the Happy Eritis is what it's called. We're going to talk about the deity, why they deify water, the quality of water, the benefits of water. We're going to go through the whole thing tomorrow, man. Talk the longer you're distracting me. Ain't nobody distracting you, man. Hush, Shawn, hush. But anyway, man, we out of here, man. See y'all tomorrow. Like I said, woo y'all live. Y'all want to tune in. And Sister Amara is also live as well. Also, go subscribe to Kofi Piesie TV. If you hadn't subscribed, please go subscribe to Kofi Piesie TV. Hit the notification bell also. And on that note, man, Black African Power. I will see y'all, man, the next time, man, or tomorrow.